Hi everyone, I'm excited about this episode because I invited two special guests to share with us their insider tips about book proposals. If you have an idea for a book, whether it's for a monograph that you are authoring yourself or an edited volume that you are compiling together with chapter contributors, you need to pitch it to an editor who will support your project toward publication. The main piece of your pitch is your book proposal. But if you are not sure how to write a book proposal, or you are at this time refining a proposal that you are planning to submit, then this is the episode for you, because today we will be answering the question, what makes a good book proposal? Scholars Unbound is a bi-monthly podcast or video series that showcases the voices of scholars who know no boundaries when it comes to the pursuit of knowledge. You will hear insights from their experiences as international scholars and how these influence their research, hoping to inspire future scholars to be fearless, global, and unbound. I'm your host, Dalia Simangon. Our first guest is Dr. Nicolas Lemay-Hébert of the Australian National University. Nick is a fellow of the Department of International Relations and also the department's director of research at ANU. His research is on state building and intervention, especially their local and political economic aspects. Nick was also the editor of my book when he was the editor of the Routledge series in which I published my book. In previous episodes, especially on episode 30 about turning my dissertation into a book, I talk about how supportive Nick was during the writing process of my book, and here he shows his support again by telling us the important components of a book proposal.
So, in terms of what are the elements of a good book proposal, I think it needs to be clear, obviously. So, normally a good book proposal will be answering a clear question, and it will be made, the case will be made clearly about why the author wants to publish in this specific book series or this specific publisher, and this is quite important. So usually this is done through the relationship with the market. So making sure that you do list similar books that have been published in this publisher or elsewhere, and making clear that what is your contribution to that literature. I think, and I'm speaking as an editor, a former editor of a book series, so the Routledge Studies in Intervention State Building. So I've seen a few book proposals in the 7 years or so that I've been the editor of this book series. And I think it's, first of all, it's important to understand that you probably need a form. So with Routledge, for instance, that was my experience. There's a specific form that Routledge uses. So I would say, before starting to type your book proposal, make sure that you look at possible forms that out there that specific publishers are using, which would help. And I would also say a good book proposal will be clear, as I said, but sometimes they are too long, right? The files are just simply too long and not making a clear case. And so try to be as succinct as possible, really making the case quite clearly why your book should be published. One way to do this is to actually write a 2-pager, and that's something that I've done in the past, and it was successful to a certain extent, is to have a 2-pager ready to, so you basically print recto verso on this on the two sides of a page, and then you bring them to a big international conference like ISA for us in international studies. And then so you go meet the publishers and the series editors and go talk to them about your work. And then having this 2-pager will help you make a clear case, and them also making a clear case about whether or not they want to take this further. So I think this is quite important. In terms of the tips about how to write or how to submit the book proposals, I would say that, as I said, it's important to contact the publishers and the series editors. So you shouldn't be afraid of contacting them. There's a number of scholars who have contacted me directly when I was the series editors, and sometimes, obviously, I would say no, but I would never be offended by receiving such an email. So I would say don't be shy. It's important that you contact them. It's way better to contact publishers directly than having to submit this through the generic email that you can find online. So try to get to get kind of a personal connection with series editors specifically. And I would also say finally that it's important to have a sense of which publisher you want to target, and not just because they are big publishers. Look at the publishers that publish similar work. So it's a bit counterintuitive. Some people would be thinking, well, if they have published similar work, maybe they don't want to publish another book. But my experience is that if they have published on that topic, they will be more inclined to publish another book on that topic rather than going developing an altogether new kind of expertise, especially if it's area studies, for example. So if you work on Southeast Asia and the specific publisher you have in mind, an American publisher, for instance, American Press, that has no actual record of publishing in that specific region, then it might not be the best place to start with. I would really start to look at the market in a sense and see where I can submit similar book projects that have been published in this specific publishers. I hope this helps.
There are 3 letter C's that I learned from Nick, and those are clarity, conciseness, and contact. The book proposal should be answering a clear question and should clearly show its contribution to the literature. These aspects can be explained in a form that is specific to publishers, so it's important to know that form very well and align the elements of your proposal with that form. Second, conciseness. I really like Nick's advice on preparing a 2-page proposal that you can carry with you while meeting potential publishers at conferences. I understand that in-person conferences and travel to these conferences are still limited these days because of COVID-19 related travel restrictions. But this 2-pager is still useful when pitching to publishers, even through email. And thirdly, it's related to contact, in particular, establishing contact and personal connections with publishers and editors. Here's where the importance of networking comes in. And although some of us claim to be not so good at doing this, including myself, I mentioned also in previous episodes the value of networking when it comes to our career and our research. And part of initiating contact and deepening these professional relationships with the editors, as Nick said, prospective authors should be familiar with the market or the similar titles being published by the editors and their publishers. Your proposal should be able to engage with these titles. I also reached out to Dominic Byatt, the publisher for Social and Behavioral Sciences, responsible for Political Science and International Relations titles for the Oxford University Press. Dominic is the editor of the upcoming book by Dr. Michael McCammett, the first guest of our podcast. I reached out to Dominic, and he readily provided us with practical tips on writing a good book proposal.
I'm often asked what's the most important thing to bear in mind when putting together a book proposal, and my usual answer is to choose the right publisher. Most academic research nowadays has become very specialised, and it means that many disciplines have a multiple of sub-disciplines within them, and publishers aren't able to publish, as it were, across the waterfront, so they too have to focus down into certain sorts of sub-disciplines, and it's therefore absolutely vital for you as a potential author for a publisher that you match the right publisher to your project. So the way to do that, I think, is to probably in the first instance scan your bibliography and see who the central publishers are, the really key players in the field that you're working within. And you could also look at the publishers' websites and check their catalogues, and if you happen to be at a conference, then check out the publisher's exhibition at the conference as well, just to get a sense of who's working in the area and who might be a good fit for your particular project. Another question I'm very often asked is, what sort of material should I send to a publisher? Now, there's no standard answer to this. I think there's no right answer. It'll vary across different publishers. I personally like to receive just a proposal document in the first instance, usually accompanied by a full academic CV as well. Now, that proposal document is obviously an absolutely central, crucial one. I would say something running to about 10 pages should be able to convey what it is that you're working on, the nature of your project, and so I'd work with that as a good average figure, but more is fine, not too much less, I'd say. That document should begin with a nice clear title, a title that describes the project that you're working on, the nature of the research that you've been engaged in, not something elusive or poetic or something like that, but something direct and straightforward, because online discoverability is very important nowadays, and main titles play a very important role in that. Also, directly under the title, make sure that you have your name as well. The refereeing process for books is anonymous as regards the referees, but authors' identities are always revealed as part of the process. So have your name underneath the title as well. Now, following on from that, you could have a paragraph or two that really encapsulates the project, that explains its main aims and themes. So there's a short introduction that a publisher can really get their head around and get a sense of what it is that you're doing. You could follow that with a section that explains its relationship to the existing literature, so that the editor can get a sense of where your work is positioned in relation to all the other publishing that's been going on and all the other research that's been going on. And then after that, you could say something about, given that relationship to the literature, exactly what its contribution is. What's the new thing that it's adding to this research field? After that, say something about the nature of the research that the project is based on. That's very helpful, I think. And then you can follow that with a table of contents. Now, that could be draft if this is an early stage in your writing, or it can reflect, obviously, the actual table of contents if you've drafted a manuscript already. And then below that table of contents, have 1 or 2 paragraphs per chapter, just explaining the ground that those chapters cover, what it is they're doing, and so on. After that, some more technical information is very helpful. You could include then just an estimate or an accurate figure for the number of words that the book is or is going to be, and then just a note on the likely delivery date as well, or if it's completed already, then obviously that's going to be straight away. And then follow that with a short bio, but as I say, I like to see a proposal that's accompanied by a full CV as well, so that's just a short bio is absolutely fine. A couple of things to bear in mind when drafting that proposal, and the first is, don't oversell what you're doing. The editor is going to get a sense of what you're up to, and if you're nice and clear about that, and the research question is an interesting one, then that's going to do all the selling that you need in terms of getting a publisher's interest. So don't oversell to the within the document to the editor concerned. It's useful if you have this option. It's not essential, but it's useful for you to maybe use your contacts that might have had an existing relationship with that publisher to maybe drop the editor concerned a line just to say, you're going to be receiving a proposal from this person. It's an interesting thing. You should probably pay attention to it. Do that if you have that option, but you'll get a fair and good reading or hearing no matter whether you do that or not. Another question I'm often asked is whether or not multiple submissions are okay, i.e. is it okay to send to a number of publishers all at one go? And I tend to say yes to that. I think it's fine, but the crucial thing there is that you're transparent about it, so that everybody knows exactly what's going on and that other publishers are also looking at the material. But it's entirely fine to send to more than one publisher at once. Now, the key question for me, I think, when looking at a proposal is it a good fit with what I'm doing, with the publishing that I've been doing, or the publishing that I'm going to be trying to be doing? So that's kind of pulling back to that point that I made a little earlier on, that it's about getting the right fit for a project with a publisher. That's the essential thing in academic publishing, I think. And so it's very important that you are approaching the right publisher in the first instance. And then I'll look at the CV as well as the proposal document, because it's just good to get a sense of whether, as an author, there's some evidence that you can deliver the sorts of things you're suggesting in the proposal. So that's good as well, I think.
There are so many takeaways from Dominic's advice. Choosing the right publisher is key, according to Dominic, and this reminds me of the difference between university presses and trade presses. We might prioritize university presses, but if such university press is not publishing on similar topics, then it's not the right fit for your book project. According to Dominic, some of the first steps you can take in finding the right publisher is by checking your bibliography, browsing through your target publisher's catalogs, and visiting their exhibitions at conferences. I also learned from Dominic the importance of a discoverable title, especially in this internet age. In my experience, I also changed my thesis title when I was publishing it into a monograph. On episode 31, I talk about the difference between my dissertation and my book and the changes I did. So if you haven't done so, I encourage you to listen to it to understand the changes you will expect along the way as you transform your dissertation into a book. Dominic also mentioned the importance of networking by using your contacts to establish a relationship with the editor. Of course, as Dominic said, all proposals will be given equal attention, but an introduction by your colleagues who previously worked with the publisher that you are aiming for is a good step when reaching out to publishers. And finally, don't oversell. The proposal should be able to speak for itself. I want to thank Dr. Nicolas Lemay-Hébert and Mr. Dominic Byatt for their contribution to this episode. I also reached out to female editors, but unfortunately, the timing was not right in time for publishing this episode. But we will continue this conversation about book publishing in the next couple of episodes, so please tune in and subscribe to the podcast and share it with your networks. You can also visit my website, www.daliasimangan.com/scholarsandbound if you're interested in joining the first cohort of the Scholars Unbound program that I'm planning later this year. Thank you for your time, and I wish you all the best in preparing your book proposals. And in doing so, don't forget to stay fearless, global, and unbound. Thank you for listening to this episode. Please consider leaving a comment or rating at iTunes or any of your preferred podcast hosting platforms. For details about upcoming episodes and how to support the Scholars Unbound project, visit daliasimangan.com/scholars unbound with the link in our show notes.